village was destroyed, and I don't know if it was. I don't think it was coincidence that the top biological um, the scientist was killed in that fire. He and his whole family, his wife and his two children as
He
well.
lived there, or
He lived there, yeah. He because he was one of the lead scientists, he got to live off base. A lot of the people, as you know, lived on base or in the town of Los Alamos. Back then, it was a secure city. You had to check in even to go into the city. Nowadays, you can drive around Las Vegas without going on to the base.
right?
But
How
back
about
then,
Little Vegas? How close was that?
that was about.
And
It
was
was,
that restricted at all?
no, it was a village that was there prior to Los Alamos being formed. Because they took all of that land from the ranchers and the Indians, and it was there beforehand. Yeah, yeah. So what we're talking about is the biological warfare. They started with mice, then piglets, then chimpanzees, and you're probably aware that the National Institute of Health, had the chimpanzee colony here in New Mexico for 50, 60 years. It was recently, they recently shut it down. Ex-Governor Bill Richardson was, helped to get it shut down and all the chimpanzees transferred. So those chimpanzees were used in like space programs.
Yeah. How'd you get into this, John?
Well, I'm a researcher just by trade. I get hired by different companies, attorneys, chemical companies, different people to research different things. And one of the research projects that I was sent to was up in Los Alamos. And in the course of researching one thing, which involved the Freedom of Information Act and looking at lots of different documents, historical societies and such, I started coming across this material about the biological warfare, and I never knew about it, so that's how I did it.
Right. And was there resistance up there to your asking questions?
Yes and no. There was, and I got some help with the New Mexico Attorney General's office. Specifically, they wrote up a letter for me, and the letter just recapped the Inspection of Public Records Act. So if I came to you and you were some clerk that didn't want to show me the records, public records, I would give you the letter from the Attorney General saying that I had the right to look at those public records.
But it's a federal installation, so
That's right.
And the feds, what did they think of you fooling around in biological warfare?
I never dealt with anybody there because they wouldn't speak with me. They didn't. That's why I had to deal with all these, some ex-scientists, the people at the chimpanzee colony, historical society.
So they were dodging you, basically. Do you think?
Well, they just didn't. They wouldn't permit any interviews at all. So I never got to be dodged. I never got that far. They don't return calls. They didn't do anything.
Right.
That's why I had to go to the Freedom of Information Act to get those replies. But that doesn't make them give interviews.
Okay. Now back us up to what year was this now?
57 and 58 is when this
57
takes
and
place.
58, and the atmosphere at large is the United States versus Russia and the Cold War and all of that stuff. So I guess for starters, a piece of this that does make sense to me is testing during the Cold War. The biological warfare you feel, or you've proven, was going on at Los Alamos at that time. And it wasn't well known, or it wasn't known at all outside of the federal government or Los Alamos or the military. Am I correct about that?
Exactly.
So how far can you trace it back, or how deep can you get into this?
That's a good question. With the Freedom of Information Act, I've gotten over 10,000 documents, and there's nothing that's going to say somebody did this on a certain date.
10,000 documents.
10,000 pages of document. 10,000
So
pages.
you're deeply curious about this. Is that
it started.
Is that what motivates you,
Yeah.
basically?
It was. I got intrigued by it once I started seeing. Once I got the manifest, for instance, for the animals, that was a big breakthrough because you know, what are you doing with 4,000 mice, you know, 3,000 rabbits, you know, 2 chimpanzees, and eventually I got to the part about the human testing, and that was provided by the Bureau of Prisons. They routinely used condemned prisoners for all kinds of testing.
Is that still the case?
I think pretty much they deny that, but I mean, we know what happens in China.
Right.
You know, we hear about it from other countries, but surely we don't do that anymore.
Right.
I don't know.
Okay, so you're aware of thousands of different kinds of animals, and
Right. Well, thousands of animals.
Thousands. Yeah.
There's basically mice, squirrels, rabbits, pigs, chimpanzees, and humans.
And other than the humans, we'll put them aside for a second. But these are animals that are normally used for testing.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's nothing strange about that.
No, today you can order up all the mice you want.
Actually, I have all the mice I need.
Okay.
But okay, so where does it go? Where does your investigation take you from the animals?
Well, once I started with that, once I knew there was actually the testing, I started through the Freedom of Information Act. And the different historians at the labs and different scientists. I was able to find some of the people that were actually involved. Not the chief scientists. I never found them, but I did find some of the people that weren't part of the hands-on team. They were the guards. So that's where most of my information, as far as hands-on information, came from. And these men now are elderly. 79, I think, is the youngest guy.
Right.
So they felt like they didn't really have anything to lose by telling the story of what they knew.
They eager to talk, or did you have to pull it out of them?
Well, they didn't know anything that happened as far as the testing. All they could really relate to was which scientists were there, the time and the length of it. They could relate to the background, a lot of the scientists, their background in chemicals or fertilizers or veterinarians or that kind of thing. But they were reluctant, but they wanted to. I don't know their motivation.
Okay.
I don't know.
So we have biological testing, which kind of makes sense particularly in that environment, and we've got a lot of test animals, which makes sense if you're going to do testing. What makes you feel that something more sinister than that happened?
Well, that's a good question. The best thing is the 3 gentlemen that I did find, the guards, when this incident happened of the village being destroyed at night, wiped out the whole village, 39 people. The very next day, these 3 men, they were sent all over the world. They were military property. They were in the service, in the Army.
Right.
So if the Army tells you that you're leaving, you're leaving. You don't get to say no or why or where. They basically had these 3 men transferred by the end of the day, the next day. They were gone from Los Alamos. So that's usually the case with the military. If you're
really just a disappearance is what makes you feel that there was an event, some sort of untoward event that went on there?
Well, that and the fire was very suspicious. There's only one reported incident about the fire in the New Mexican or even in the Los Alamos papers. The historians really were the ones that put most of the fuel on this. They really outlined a lot of the different programs that I didn't know about that are not secret anymore.
And these are the people, I think I interrupted you earlier, but these are the people that you've sort of relied on for some of the information.
Right. They, again, I went through the Freedom of Information Act, Inspection of Public Record Act, so I could find hard evidence of lots of different things. So I found the manifest for all of the technology used. I found the manifest for all of the...
Now tell me what a manifest is.
A manifest is for each of the projects that you're developing at Los Alamos, you're going to have to put together a cost analysis and equipment that is needed. It has to be bid on, whether it's an open bid or a secret bid or a black project. It's not bid at all. You just get a checkbook to do whatever you want. you have to have a manifest or explaining what you're looking for. So like I said, the first one I found was the animals. So those animals had to be used for something, and testing makes sense. I found the manifest for the equipment, videotaping equipment, which was brand new at the time, all kinds of surgical equipment, surgical tools, fans, televisions, which was part of the videotaping.
And these are items that wouldn't be used for some other purpose at Los Alamos, but you believe were used for this biological testing, that, if I understand correctly, you believe somehow created the destruction of the village.
Right. Yeah, my belief is, in listening and connecting the dots, the virus actually escaped the village. I have pretty good information from one of the people that I did track down was the son of the head veterinarian. The head veterinarian, Amy Smart, is deceased, but her son knew about her mother working there, of course, for those few years, and she kept a diary, which she really wasn't supposed to do, but she did. And this diary is really an outline of her checking in all of these various test animals. She wasn't involved in the testing. So I've pieced a lot of that together, and then with the chemicals that were on the manifest, they're only used for certain things. You know, they weren't used for, you know, if you had a headache, this was used in almost exclusively animal testing or human testing.
Now, jumping ahead for a second, what makes you feel that the destruction of the village is directly connected to the biological testing?
Well, that's a good question. One of the people that I did interview, that I did get a hold of, again, like I said, with the guards, was one of the guys that was on the fire team. He did admit, and it's pretty much public knowledge, if you're involved at Los Alamos, there's certain protocols if there's a problem at Los Alamos in your lab. If you have a disaster in the lab, you're going to call one of 3 different fire teams. Either it's nuclear, biological, or it's a regular old fire. And if it's a fire, is it electrical fire or is it material? So long story short, this guy was on the fire team, the final fire team, the second fire team. The first one went up there and tried to rescue the doctor and the village and bring him back to the labs, and they failed. They called in the real fire team that came in to just destroy everything. So I found
they came from Los Alamos proper, from the government facility?
That's a good question. And the newspaper, they kind of dodged who the firefighters were, and they implied it was the city of Alamos. But it wasn't. Definitely, I can tell you right now, I checked the records there, city of Los Alamos was not involved in this at all. It was 100% lab people.